Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're not just dusting off some old history books. Oh no, we are diving into the epic construction of a literal democratic masterpiece, the making of the Indian Constitution. Think of this document not just as a dry set of laws, but as an incredibly intricate architectural blueprint. It's a foundation designed to house, protect, and unite a staggering amount of diversity. It's a completely fascinating journey full of strategy, intense debate, and just profound foresight.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a clear roadmap for this massive historical journey, broken down into 5 digestible blueprints. We're going to hit the rulebook of a nation, assembling the architects, drafting the objectives, a tale of 2 dates, and finally, shaping a modern India.
Starting right off with Section 1, the rulebook of a nation, defining the foundation. Now, before we figure out how they built this thing, we gotta understand what it actually is, right? For a newly independent India, this document had to be the ultimate moderator. It wasn't just about setting up the legislature, the executive branch, and the judiciary. It had to act as this vital shield, protecting citizens from arbitrary power in a deeply, deeply complex society. It's the core framework that makes sure governance is smooth, fair, and actually works for the welfare of the people. Moving right along to Section 2. Assembling the architects. A diverse framework. Look, to build a masterpiece, you absolutely need master builders. The Constituent Assembly was first proposed back in 1946 by the Cabinet Mission Plan, and honestly, it was massive. It originally consisted of 389 members. Now, keep in mind that number represented an undivided India, pulling together elected folks from provincial assemblies and nominated members from the princely states. So the crucial point is that history took a massive, tragic turn. Following the trauma of partition and the demand for a separate state of Pakistan, the Muslim League boycotted the assembly. Members who represented territories going to Pakistan withdrew. Because of that, the membership of the Constituent Assembly for India itself was dramatically reduced down to 299 members. Now, this group had a completely mammoth task ahead of them. Dr. Rajendra Prasad stepped up to become the president of the assembly, but the real heavy lifting, well, that fell to the drafting committee. Led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as its chairman, these were the absolute key draftsmen of the nation's future.
But it wasn't just a handful of men in a closed-off room. Despite the boycott, Indian National Congress leaders worked intentionally to make sure the assembly was truly national in its character. They expanded representation way beyond the initial categories. They brought in voices from Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians, Parsis, and crucially, they made sure that scheduled castes and tribes had a seat at the table. They knew, for sure, that a constitution for everyone had to be written by everyone.
We literally cannot talk about these architects without highlighting this incredible historical detail. Out of that 299-member assembly, there were exactly 15 remarkable women. Prominent figures like Sarojini Naidu, Sachaya Kriplani, and Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit were right there on the front lines. And they didn't just passively participate. They fiercely advocated for economic, social, and political equality for every single citizen. They played an absolutely vital role in scripting this constitution. All right, Section 3, drafting the objectives, the master blueprint. And this brilliantly illustrates what they were actually trying to build. In December 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru introduced the Objectives Resolution. Think of this not as the legal text, but as the moral compass of the modern state. It laid down 4 huge steps. First, a free India would be a republic, so no more monarchs. Second, it guaranteed not just political but social and economic democracy. Third, it promised fundamental rights to the citizens. And fourth, it explicitly mandated safeguarding minorities and backward classes. This resolution became the guiding soul of the whole document. Which brings us to Section 4, a tale of 2 dates, the ribbon cutting. So every grand project has a ribbon cutting ceremony, right? But this one has a genuinely strange historical quirk. You might be wondering, if the Constitution was officially passed and adopted with 284 members signing it on November 26, 1949, why in the world did the nation wait 2 whole months until January 26, 1950 to actually enact it? Why wait when the work was done? Well, the answer is basically a carefully planted historical Easter egg. Let's rewind a bit. Back in December 1929, at the Lahore Session, the Congress made a massive declaration for Poorna Swaraj, meaning complete independence. They then fixed January 26, 1930, as the first Independence Day, and they celebrated that date every single year until actual independence. So to honor the gravity of that specific date, the framers deliberately waited to enact the new Constitution on January 26, 1950, the day we all know now as Republic Day.
Finally, Section 5, Shaping a Modern India. The Legacy. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer weight of history you can practically feel on that headline. New Constitution adopted. This wasn't just news for the day. It was a massive victory. British rule was completely over. The old colonial laws were totally swept away and replaced by a system framed by Indians for Indians. It was the dawn of a completely new era.
I mean, the real-world changes this document kicked off were just monumental. It officially established India as a sovereign democratic republic. Crucially, and this was a real game-changer, it granted universal adult franchise. Giving the right to vote to every citizen above 21 in a highly unequal world was incredibly radical at the time. It guaranteed fundamental rights like equality and free speech, and it laid down a hard foundation for social justice by outright abolishing untouchability and prohibiting discrimination.
This masterpiece isn't just history, you guys. It is a living guide of justice, liberty, and fraternity that demands our ongoing attention. And I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If this living document successfully managed to unite such a wildly diverse, newly independent nation back then, how does its framework continue to protect and shape the lives of over 1 billion citizens today? It's a brilliant question to carry with you as you watch the news and observe the ongoing democratic experiment. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.